This video is brought to you by Squarespace, an all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Squarespace makes it easy to create a beautiful website. More about them at the end of the video. Oh, hello. Many Magic the Gathering players ask the question, how do I build a Bracket 2 and Bracket 3 commander deck? If each deck had the same commander, what are the differences between them? These are relevant questions now that brackets are here, and all commander decks now fall into one of 5 brackets based on the game experience that they are intended for. These brackets range from the ultra-casual Exhibition Bracket 1 all the way up to the fully fledged, fully powered CEDH Bracket 5. However, these two extremes are actually the least 2 common brackets that you'll encounter when playing Commander. Most Commander decks that the average Commander player builds are either brackets 2, 3, or 4. The goal of this formalized bracket system is to make for better gameplay, particularly among players who don't already have an established rapport, such as games played at your local game store Commander Night or in the command zone of a Magic Con. Games played before 4 decks within the same bracket will be more fun and balanced than games played between decks of a mix of brackets. Now, this is all well and good, but how does one maintain which bracket their deck falls into? A simple count of the number of Game Changer cards in the list might give you a clue, but it's not quite as simple as that. After all, it's entirely possible for a deck to run 0 Game Changer cards and still be a Bracket 3 deck. It's clear that a Precon is usually a Bracket 2 deck, but what if you want to build a Precon level Bracket 2 deck from scratch rather than buying one already complete in a box? This video is an in-depth deck building guide updated for brackets, where I go over the differences between a Bracket 2 and Bracket 3 deck, aside of course from whether or not the deck has any Game Changer cards. Keep in mind that this is not an exact science. There are a few hard and fast rules that mark clear-cut differences between the brackets, but there is a ton of gray area in between. This video is meant to serve as a guide to help you build your commander decks with the new system in mind, but every deck you build will be different, with different requirements for aligning it with your chosen bracket. In the end, how you build your deck remains up to you, even with this more formal system in place. And I'll of course include the full deck lists in this video's description, and before you go to the comments telling me I don't know what I'm talking about and I didn't actually build a Bracket 2 or a Bracket 3 deck, I'll have you know that I literally ran these lists by Gavin, and he affirmed that they were indeed Brackets 2 and 3 decks. Remember, commander deck building is an art, not a science. You don't need to be Kyle Hill to put together a commander deck. You just need clear eyes, a full heart, and you can't lose. All that being said, let's begin, shall we? The second bracket is the core bracket. Decks in this bracket are trying to win, but they aren't optimizing for the best possible chance at victory. Having fun and doing cool, exciting, or flavorful things are both more important than actually being the person who ends up on top in a given game. According to Gavin, Bracket 2 decks may not have every perfect card, but they have the potential for big, splashy turns, strong engines, and are built in a way that works towards winning the game. Games generally take 9 or more turns to end, and can tend toward big swings with one player suddenly turning the tables on another player. That said, the game probably won't end completely out of nowhere. From a deck building standpoint, there are a few clear-cut rules. No Game Changer cards, no 2-card infinite combos, and no mass land denial. If you play any extra turn cards, they should appear only in low quantities and are not intended to be chained in succession or looped. Any tutors in your deck should be sparse aside from those that tutor for lands. Your deck likely has cards that are included for flavor reasons or because they're personal favorites of yours despite not being the strongest strategic choice. But beyond these more specific rules, there's also a philosophy to follow with Bracket 2. If there's a card that's on theme and cool, you should run it. Don't worry if it costs too much mana. The games will go long enough that you'll have time to deploy the cool card and see it do its thing. Mana curve as a whole is not a huge concern. You'll still want early plays, of course, but the slow pace of the game means it's totally fine if you spend the early game just getting your mana ramp online so you can start playing your cool big splashy cards sooner. Remember, it's not just about your deck's power level. It's also about the expected power level of the decks your deck intends to face and the resulting ways that games between them play out. I think of Bracket 2 as the kitchen table magic bracket. You've got your deck you built with a plan in mind around your chosen commander with cards you like from your collection. You're playing to have fun, and you want your opponents to have fun too. The game does have to end at some point though, and your deck is oriented in that direction in its own way. Part 1. Choosing a commander. To build a Bracket 2 deck, the first step is the same step as the other two primary tiers, choosing who will headline it. The thought process behind this step is actually identical to those other two tiers as well. It's really as simple as asking yourself, who do I think would be a cool commander to build around? Though there are, of course, some commanders that are inherently more or less powerful than average, most legendary creatures can be built around with any of the three major brackets in mind. There are a few exceptions, of course. Any of the commanders on the Game Changers list automatically disqualify themselves from Bracket 2, barring a Rule 0 conversation with your Bracket 2 pod. And some legends are so weak that they really only work in Bracket 1. But for the most part, if there's a legendary creature you think would be a cool choice to helm a commander deck, then you can probably build a deck of any bracket around that card. You just might have to be more mindful of scaling up or down the power level of your 99 to balance out the gameplay patterns your chosen commander would lead to. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to use the same commander throughout to keep the top of the deck uniform. Let's assume you've been wanting to build a Teysa Karlov deck. Teysa Karlov is one of the most popular commanders for Aristocrats strategies, itself one of Commander's most popular archetypes. She's also inherently flexible. You can build a Teysa deck with a number of different play experiences in mind. It's just as easy to build a Bracket 2 Teysa deck as it is to build her for Bracket 3 or 4. So let's say you are building a Teysa Karlov deck and you're aiming for Bracket 2. How do you go about building the rest of your deck? What is in your 99? Part 2. Composing the 99. The 99 of a Bracket 2 can look a lot of different ways, but broadly speaking, the deck list should be tailored toward the mid to late game. Your engines will often cost 4 or 5 mana, and you've got some big splashy expensive cards you'll slam on the table once you get up to the 6, 7, or 8 mana range. The early turns are for getting your mana online, maybe playing out a synergy piece or two that'll come in handy later, and of course, making your land drops. In a Teysa deck, regardless of which bracket you're building her for, you'll want all the same categories of cards. Your sacrifice outlets, your permanents with death triggers, and your sacrifice fodder. Bonus points if they have death triggers themselves. You'll also want some copies of the kinds of cards every commander deck wants in some quantities. Your spot removal, your board wipes, and your card draw spells. The key factor with your Bracket 2 Teysa deck, though, is you aren't putting in all the best-in-slot versions of each effect, especially if those best-in-slot cards are cards that significantly speed up the game. You won't find a Phyrexian Altar or probably even an Ashnod's Altar in a Bracket 2 Teysa Karlov deck, even though neither card is on the Game Changers list. You will, however, still see alternative cheap sack outlets like Viscera Seer and Barthelme. Only running one copy of a collection of similar kinds of powerful cards for your strategy is a great way to manually power down your deck to fit into Bracket 2. For instance, you might decide to include Warren's Soul Trader despite its similarities to Phyrexian Altar, because paying life mitigates the card's combo potential. Likewise, though you might want to run one Grave Pact effect in your Bracket 2 Teysa deck, you probably don't want to run 3. You might specifically choose to run the most expensive variant, Butcher of Malakar, both because he's dope and because his big 7 mana cost is perfect for the kinds of games you intend to play with your Teysa Karlov deck. Intent matters a lot here. What you intend to do with the card matters as much, if not more, than what the card is capable of. Remember, aligning your deck with a bracket is not an exact science. Bracket 2 Teysa has no qualms including plenty of Blood Artist style cards, since these don't threaten to win the game quickly if the rest of your deck operates at a much slower pace. These exact same cards in a Bracket 3 or even Bracket 4 deck would be incredibly threatening because they'd be paired with more powerful sack outlets and a more steady stream of fodder. For top end, we've got some really sweet cards that would not cut it at the higher brackets, but are perfect for a typical Bracket 2 game. Wormcoil Engine and its big sibling Triplicate Titan each make 4 and 6 tokens on death, with Teysa in play. Ashen Rider is another awesome card in the deck, exiling any permanent when it enters and then 2 more when it dies. There are also big beefy creatures to reanimate with cards like Victimize, Dread Return, and Lich Knight's Conquest. Lich Knight Conquest in particular is a very fun card in a bracket 2 Teysa deck, since it's a way to sack a bunch of your tokens that the deck is great at making while bringing back all sorts of goodies from your yard for a massive splashy turn. Though it doesn't synergize with your game plan very much, maybe you decide to include a copy of Ethereal Absolution in the deck anyway for flavor reasons, since Teysa is featured in the artwork. Inkshield 2 is a very cool Orzhov card designed by Sheldon Menery himself, but doesn't actually fit the game plan beyond making some tokens as additional sack fodder. Finally, the deck runs several mana rocks to better set itself up to cast some of these bigger cards at a reasonable pace. These are some of the first cuts I would look to, along with some of the big top-end cards when trying to upgrade the deck. That's because Aristocrat strategies tend to have a pretty low mana curve, and therefore have less need for mana ramp compared to some other kinds of decks that you might build. Speaking of upgrades, what if you'd rather build a bracket 3 Teysa deck? Well, Part 3. Upgrading your deck to bracket 3. A bracket 3 deck drops all the bells and whistles from the bracket 2 deck list in favor of more cards that play a direct role in the deck's ability to set up and execute its engine, plus additional cards capable of disrupting opponents' engines. In the case of our Teysa deck, I've already mentioned Mana Rocks and Top End are among the first cards we'd cut, including Wormcoil Engine, as sweet as it is. We will leave a pair of top end cards though, Massacre Worm and Liliana Dreadhorde General, whose death triggers each pop off with Teysa in play. This is optional, of course. There's no rule you have to run 6 mana cards in your bracket 3 commander deck, but if you want to, you'll have to be selective about the cards you pick. Only those that immediately impact the board in some way are worth keeping. As for other cuts, well, Lich Knight's Conquest was the kind of big turn card that looks great in bracket 2, but doesn't cut it in bracket 3, so out it goes. Other cards I'd cut when upgrading this bracket 2 list to a bracket 3 list include Inkshield, Disciple of Bolas, Accursed Marauder, and Victimize. These cards sort of synergize with your Aristocrat strategy, but not really, and certainly not as well as other cards we left out of our bracket 2 deck would. Kaya's Wrath gets swapped out for the much more flexible Damn! Butcher of Malachar gets replaced by both its counterparts, Grave Pact and Dictate of Erebos. With our curve lower, we can trim on a land or two, especially since our engines are more powerful and we'll be drawing cards sooner and in greater quantities now that we're in bracket 3. The 2 altars we had excluded from bracket 2 are here now, Ashnods and Phyrexian, as well as a third, Altar of Dementia. Luminous Broodmoth and Drivnod Carnage Dominus boost the strength of our plan considerably when they're in play, to the point where we couldn't really run them in bracket 2. Cards like Esper Sentinel, Teferi's Protection, and Anointed Procession are now included in the deck list, another sign of the increased pace of play. We also added our first tutor in the form of Diabolic Intent, and you could run more if you like. For instance, Mausoleum Secrets would often be the same as Demonic Tutor in this deck. Finally, when bringing this up to a bracket 3, we would include the missing piece for an infinite combo, Gravecrawler, which goes infinite with either Warren Soul Trader, Phyrexian Altar, or any sack outlet plus either Life Insurance or Pitiless Plunderer to generate mana. One more thing. I've kept the mana base for both decks roughly the same, since Gavin made a point to mention even low bracket decks can have a great mana base with fetch lands, shock lands, and the like. Hey Gavin, can I run original dual lands in my bracket 2 commander deck? Gavin says yes! He actually said yes and gave permission for me to show this. This is what he actually said, by the way. One change I did make to the mana base was cutting back on tap lands that work fine in bracket 2, but slow you down too much in bracket 3. I replaced them with Phyrexian Tower, a utility land that is a bit too good for bracket 2, but fits very well into bracket 3. With these changes made, the deck list as it stands is now a bracket 3 commander deck. You'll notice I did not add a single card from the Game Changers list in order to make these upgrades. That doesn't mean you totally couldn't add a Demonic Tutor or an Ancient Tomb or what have you to this deck if you wanted to. Personally, if I was going to add one single game changer card to the Bracket 3 list, it would be Bolas's Citadel, since the card functions as both a mega sack outlet and an absurd card advantage engine that makes great use of all the incidental life gain the deck is capable of, thanks to its doubled Blood Artist triggers. But the point I'm trying to illustrate here is that you don't have to run these cards to build a Bracket 3 deck. The 3 Game Changers ceiling is precisely that, a ceiling. You have plenty of agency underneath that ceiling to build your deck however you'd like. Again, full deck lists are in this video's description, and I hope very much this video has been of some help to you. And remember, you can get 100% free webcam games of Commander on the Tolarian Community College Discord server. It's 100% free and a great opportunity to try out brackets for yourself. I'm proud that we offer those webcam games of Commander for 100% free to everyone. We try to maintain a cool web presence like that here at Tolarian Community College. And you know, speaking of web presence, having and maintaining a personal website is vital for anyone whose work depends on their online presence or brand. Whether you're an artist or a content creator, or you run an online business, you need a place where interested potential clients or collaborators can come across your work. And the best way to create a brand new professional-looking website is with Squarespace, sponsor of today's video. Squarespace makes building a website easy with their massive library of templates for getting started and their simple customization tools. Their new guided design system will help you personalize your website to the unique needs of your brand, product, or art. And once you launch your website, you'll get discovered fast with their integrated and optimized search engine optimization tools, meaning you show up more often to more people and grow the way you want to grow. Do you have a small business and you're looking to boost your clientele? Sell your products or services with an online store. From physical goods to digital content to services, Squarespace has all the tools you need to start selling online. Checkout will be seamless with your customers thanks to Squarespace's simple but powerful built-in payment tools. You can accept credit cards, PayPal, or Apple Pay, and in eligible countries, you can even offer customers the option to buy now and pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay. And Squarespace's website and seller analytics provide all the data you need to scale your brand or business, fully integrated and clearly displayed. So go to squarespace.com now for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Tolarian Community College to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
We're talking about Brexit again on Shuffle Up and Play. We have brought our pet decks. Maybe not the most powerful Commander decks, but some of our favorites from over the years that we just can't put down and can't stop tuning up.
Hey, anyone want to concede quickly?
Thank God, I'm out of here.
Nice.
Get him, get him.
I don't like bowing to politics, but
Bow to me.
Ailey is right. Wow, okay.
I think the kids started thinking that the word bussin' is cringe.
If it wasn't before, it is
now.
I just want to see you hoisted on your own petard, man. Like, you pay 20, like, don't make the minion and then just sit there. Do you have a Gru cosplay?
Normally, it's over the head. I'm a parent of a small child.
Okay.
I Urza hate minions.